Welcome to Business Mastery with Dawn Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, which is strategic planning, and why, for small businesses, that annual plan is just not enough anymore. So I have Marc here. He's going to tell us all about it. We're going to talk through why we need to be planning maybe a little more than was suggested by people who meant well, but maybe didn't understand the business like you do. So how are you, Marc? Are you good?
Well, I'm great. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for having me.
All right. Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
I started my first business in 1978. In 79, it was called Computer Discount of America. Right off the bat, I felt some real serious challenges, and I'll talk a little bit more about that today. But when I first started that business, I was selling computers. And obviously, computers were so new, and it was an emerging trend. So I was really lucky and fortunate to be in the right place and picking the right industry at the right time. Really blessed. But a year in, I already had a $2 million business, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Let's be honest, I had just gotten lucky. So while I had a degree in finance, I really started to read every book there was at the time on strategic planning. I read Rockefeller, all about some of the things he did, and read all the books that were out there at that moment in time. And that's where I really started to become really knowledgeable about putting together a strategy or a strategic plan to help drive the growth. I was a very competitive, young, early 20s. I wanted to be the number one mail order company in the United States, and did end up growing that company to over $50 million before I sold it. Today, I've launched literally a half a dozen businesses by myself and helped hundreds of other customers and other clients of mine launch businesses. So today I'm a strategic planning coach, but I really focus on execution too. The plan, for some effects, is worthless if it's not executed. You could have a binder and put it in your desk drawer, and that's what I've seen also. Mm-hmm. So as my career developed as a strategic planner, I realized that so many people, I would give them a really good plan, and then that would stop, and they wouldn't execute. So we'll talk a little bit more about the need for execution today. So that's it, in a nutshell, what I do. Plan, execute.
All right. So let's just start with the basics of what a strategic plan is versus what I'm going to say is that one-year business plan. So everyone is encouraged to do a one-year plan for their business. And depending on who you talk to, it could just be a projections and a business plan where we're going to add 2 employees and there's no dependencies maybe written in, no contingency action. So can we just start by talking about what is in a strategic plan that would separate it from that 9-section business plan that most of us are familiar with?
The big thing is that there's been some thought process that goes into it. And it doesn't have to be a 3-day retreat.
Yes.
Really, you can do a decent strategic plan. I can do a decent one with any company in about 3 hours. And as we move forward to that, but as you point out, I'll walk into a plant and I'll say, have you ever had a strategic plan done? And they'll say, oh yeah, my CFO put together a plan for us. And basically what it is an Excel spreadsheet, and it's a forecast, right? Also, I've also seen plans where I have 2 of them right here on the floor alongside of my desk, where I get a binder this thick. That's like putting a fire hose in somebody's mouth. I'm literally going to rip their head off their body. So many of these strategic plans go too deep as well. So as an owner of a small to medium business, anywhere from a startup to $10 million, you can't have a strategic plan that isn't focused on 2 or 3 or 4 major achievements that you want to make in that quarter. So the strategies, I basically go through 4 major components. We look at what the company's strengths are. If it's startup, what's the owner's strength or what's the startup strength? So what's working for you today? That's your strength. And so many people they ignore their strength because, they see a shiny object and let's do something with AI. But what are you strong at today? Let's do some social media. What are you strong at today? You can leverage what you're strong at today with AI or with social media, but leverage your strengths. So many companies don't really dive into strengths. And the answer I always get is our strength is our people. Then I say, of course you're not hiring stupid people. You're not hiring bad people, right? Of course you're hiring good people, right?
Yeah.
No, tell me what is so strong about them. Oh, they all have law degree. If you're a lawyer, they all have law degrees from Harvard. That's your strength. That's something that you can put in an ad. So what is so strong about your people? Don't just tell me our strength is our people. It's really so important to isolate the strengths. The next most important thing, and it's a long answer to a question, but strategic planning, when I do it, then I look at what the biggest weakness is. And the room always gets quiet. They listed 20 strengths in a heartbeat, right? But now the room gets quiet. And it's because they don't want to point at each other. Oh, we're weak in social media. Meanwhile, their marketing director is sitting there. So I have to get them to get really brutally honest. And that's what I encourage every client to do. Get brutally honest with your staff and also, more importantly, with yourself. With yourself. What are you weak at? Because that's where you need to reach outside of the box and bring some talent in that area to supplement where you're weak, right? So weaknesses. And then look, if you look at a traditional SWOT invented by Albert Humphrey, or he's the first person that wrote about it anyway, in 1960s at MIT. He said, okay, now list all your opportunities. And the mistake there is if you list 20 opportunities, I'm always going to take the shiny one or two first. No, I don't want to, I skip right over opportunities at that point in time. I go to trends because trends are where you can really drive some rapid growth.
Okay.
So funding in the world.
Really quick, let me just recap this for everybody. So the way that you look at SWOT, because people will say, oh, I do SWOTs. I know what a SWOT is. So it's for you, it's strengths, weaknesses, and trends.
And then one final one. I mean, I went out of order there a little bit, but on purpose. Then before we come up with 4 major projects, we look at what's your greatest obstacle.
Okay.
And my greatest obstacle could be cash. My greatest obstacle could be my staff. I have high turnover in my staff. I don't have enough people. My biggest obstacle, whatever it might be. A lot of times it's cash, but what is your biggest obstacle that's going to prevent you from really being successful in this next quarter? But the trend is so important because if you're looking for rapid growth, that's where you really want to try to uncover a trend. And people say, what if I'm wrong? You're going to be wrong more than you're right on a trend. That's why we don't do yearly strategic planning anymore. We do quarterly. So imagine you're a surfer. And if anybody's ever surfed or even been there riding waves with their kids in the waves at the shore, you look back and you say, oh, here comes a big wave. Jump on your raft and we'll fly in. Or jump on your surfboard and we'll fly in. That one was a dud. That was a terrible wave. And that's quarter 1, right? Now quarter 2 comes and you're looking back, you see another tree and you jump up and wow, that one was good. Now I know what to look for. So you might want to redo that trend again, but do it in a slightly different way. Or maybe it was another dud. But if you do 4 trends over a year, one of them will be successful. And that's what I've found because I've guessed wrong on the trends frequently in my career. But if I'm looking at a trend, even if I go 4 or 5, 6 quarters, eventually I'll find a trend that's going to drive growth. So trend's very important if somebody's looking for rapid growth. And a trend can also be a negative thing in the economy. In the when the stock market fell apart in 2008, I was running a company called Diligent, and we were doing electronic board books for board companies. Company was growing. I'd just taken the company public on the New Zealand stock market. I raised 20 million New Zealand dollars. Really exciting period. But then Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, and we had this terrible financial crisis. And everybody we were talking to said, "No, Mark, we love your product, but we're not going to move forward with it right now." And I had a sales team at that point of about 8 people with a support staff around that. And the first instinct, everybody was, let's lay them off. We got to lay them off. We got to scale down really quickly. And all of a sudden I looked, and of the 5 customers we had signed in the previous month, 3 of them were banks. The banks were in crisis, and they were being audited by Bush and then Obama. Within 2 business days, I'd signed up for every banking show, East to West Coast, and traveled for the next year just hanging out with bankers. Because no longer could the bankers come in and play golf and eat dinner. They had to look at their board material. So an electronic board book presentation, and they had to look at all their portfolios. So if they had 2,000 home loans, they had to look at all 2,000 home loans. And their board books were like this. I'm talking 3 or 4 binders. And they had to not meet once per quarter. They now had to meet every other week because they were being audited. And some of them were being shut down by the government. So that's riding a negative trend to a positive result. And over this next year, I am not a doom and gloomer, folks. I'm not a doom and gloomer, but we're going to be seeing some very negative trends. We're already seeing them in the economy. So those are the 4 things that I really latch onto. Now, there's some things that I do ahead of that, like what's your core purpose? What's your core values of your company? So I do look at other components before, but the SWOT 4 is really what helps me create the game plan for the businesses going forward for the next quarter.
So let's talk a little bit about, we were talking offline before we started about the complexity in the economy right now and the complexity in the marketplace, and how a lot of times we're not caught short because we maybe didn't anticipate something. We get caught short because we think we have more or less time. And if we only do it once a year or once every 6 months, we're actually not taking the time to sit every 90 days and do that evaluation on those 4 projects. Was it a sequencing issue, a timing issue, a dependency issue, rather than, it didn't work. We'll try to get next year. And I want to talk with you a little bit about how the complexity in the market is driving this need to shorten the time frame between the last time you sat down and really thought and planned and the time that you really need to set aside to think and plan, which is actually collapsing time, in my opinion. Instead of being 1 to 3 years, which is typically what you're told when you're a small to medium business, you have a year is fine. Not that much is going to change, right? It's like your projection, right? So you and I can laugh about it, but isn't that kind of the conventional wisdom? If you go out and you look at blogs and you look at leaders in business, like small business development companies and those kinds of things, that they tell you a year is probably good.
Yeah, every company some of the larger companies I've worked with do a yearly strategic plan. Unfortunately, that doesn't work these days. Technology is moving so fast. If I was John D. Rockefeller in the 1800s, the only way to get from point A to B fast was on a train or a steamship boat. There were no cars yet. So you could do a yearly plan back then. But technology is moving so fast, and even faster than we realize now with the advent of AI, things are just rapidly moving. Let me answer your question in a slightly different way.
Okay.
I'm old. I was in high school in the 70s. And when I first got my license, gas was 25 cents a gallon. And by the time I went to college, it had doubled in price. It went to 50 cents per gallon. And 2 years later, the economy went in a major downspin, which we call stagflation. It was the first or one of the earlier dominoes to fall in that was the price of oil doubling. I don't know if you folks have realized out there, but over the last 90 days, the price of gas has doubled. In the last 90 days. So if you're going to do a yearly plan, and you did a yearly plan thinking you had your act together for this year, rip it in half. Because things are changing, and they're going to change rapidly because all that has a downhill effect. Last week, inflation exceeded pay raises. Another domino falling towards stagflation. Now, again, I'm not a doom and gloomer, and I'm not an economist. But if I go back to the 70s, and I grew up through this and launched my first business through this, it's looking very similar, right? So now inflation has exceeded your pay raise. So if you got 10% pay raise this year or 5% pay raise, if you got a 4% pay raise, which is the average, inflation is now blown past your pay raise. So what's that doing? The same amount of dollars moving through the economy, but there's less margin to the merchants, less margins to the businesses, less new production needed. All my money went to buy for food increase and gasoline increases, so I'm not going to buy a new refrigerator. So now that's going to have an inevitable effect on earnings reports 6, 7, 8 months from now. So it's this cascade of dominoes that are falling. So it's time to make sure that you're doing a strategic plan every quarter and make sure you're seeing how the economy is changing.
Yeah, I do want to dive a little bit more into that, because when you hear the word trends, people are probably thinking trends in the industry or trends in how people are interfacing with products and services and things. But here's the bigger thing. We're a coffee company, right? I own a coffee roastery, and our coffee is specialty coffee. It is disposable income. You can always go get Folgers, right? So we watch things, or at least I do because I'm a nerd. I'll watch things like the used car market. I will watch things where people are turning back their second cars. Whereas if you're turning in your second car, then that means that there might be a disposable income, which could definitely affect my product and how I get out into the world, if you will. So we do watch larger trends away from and outside of our industry, like coffee prices. You're saying that business owners, we do have a responsibility to be watching those larger trends to help us make those strategic decisions. Your point about gas prices doubling, I don't know if everybody listening here considers that to be a variable that they need to put into their strategic plan, because they're like, we don't sell gasoline. We don't do delivery. We don't do. So curious about what your thoughts are about our responsibility to follow the larger trends when making decisions for our business because of the people that we serve and also the people we employ.
There's so much that can be done. I'm not real familiar with the coffee market, but I can only imagine that, number one, to roast your beans, that price is going to go up because electricity is going to go up because the price of oil has gone up. Crude oil's gone up. I can only imagine that bringing it from different locations, South America, wherever it might come from, it's going to cause more to bring it in.
Yep.
And if the fertilizers, I don't know if you use fertilizers on coffee, but if the fertilizers don't get out of the Strait of Hormuz, maybe there won't be as many beans, and that'll drive the price up. And then people just get nervous, and that's called supply and demand. And that nervousness will create coffee futures to go up. So what can you do? As you probably all have hedged some of your bets.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you bought more green beans. Maybe you brought in extra. Maybe you looked where you can buy it at a lower price. So these trends you have to recognize now. And then you have to think about your purchaser. What can you do to attract buyers? You can offer something that you have a good profit margin on right now. You can offer a good price on it. You can offer a new feature of something, whether it's a low-fat latte or whatever it might be. And I'm thinking coffee on my brain right now. I drink coffee.
The bigger point here is that the gas prices are very relevant to our business decisions, right? If we're thinking that we have this 1-year plan and that's fine. And maybe some things in our industry are variable, but we're not watching the broader things that haven't hit the industry yet. Like you said, it could be 8 months before the futures are affected. Then it is our obligation, I think, to at least have some idea about the broader economic things that are going to affect business in some way. And so in the strategic planning, I think it's very easy to sit down and say, hey, these are the things that are affecting our industry, full stop. Let's figure out how to navigate within the industry, full stop. And I think to your point, there are a lot broader things that maybe we're not considering. First of all, we're not probably doing them soon enough or fast enough or often enough. But then also maybe there are things broader outside of our industry that we're not paying attention to that can definitely affect those 4 strategic projects that you choose.
Yep. When tariffs hit, and that was a trend. In some businesses, it could be viewed as a positive trend, negative trend. That was a trend. And I coach a pool company. Been able to get their revenue 50% larger than it was just a year ago. And then we started working profitability. And then the tariffs hit. So, I actually got on the phone with the owner and I said, buy pool heaters and pool pumps today. And they brought in enough pool heaters and pumps to supply all the pools that they'll build in 2026. 2 weeks ago, I was on site at his, he said, thank God you told us to do that, Mark. Now, these are the kind of things that you need to look at as a business owner, is what trends are going to hit you. And that's why this quarterly, and you really have to have a discipline of saying, I'm just going to go away for a day. And it might be leaving your office, or it might just be locking your door and saying, I'm not taking any calls today. And you have to, and preferably with your team. If you have an executive team, do it with your team. Lock them in the room and spend 3 hours to a whole day, lunch, maybe take them to dinner at the end of the day, and once per quarter. It'll be the best investment you made in your business. One more quick example on a negative trend that COVID came. We could have waited for COVID to go away. And that's what so many businesses did. They say it's not going to get that bad. And then the refrigerator trucks started wheeling and hopefully we have it contained. And well, let's just wait for it to end. Wait for it to end. No, you had to react like it was never going to end. That's what you had to do as a business. So today you have to be reacting more rapidly to the changes that are, you have to protect your business. The people that wait are going to be left in the dust and their businesses are going to struggle or fail. And the people that leverage what's going on right now are going to be the winners at the end of this when the dust settles. Again, I'm not a doom and gloomer. I always have a very positive attitude. So I sound like I'm predicting something terrible. But we're facing some real serious challenges right now. And I hope it's important for business leaders to say, oh, let's wait for the economy to improve. No, the economy is not going to improve quickly. It's not going to improve quickly. There's things coming that people don't even realize. 40% of the helium comes through the Straits of Hormuz. You cannot make memory chips without floating the metal in the air as you pull on the silicone. They float it with helium. I've worked for Flextronics, a multi-billion-dollar company that manufactures memory chips. Helium is a needed ingredient. So what's that going to mean for the TV sets that are going to go on sale this Christmas? What's it going to mean for all the electronics in cars? Cars don't really need electronics right now because every car dealer is struggling. A lot of the U.S. ones anyway. But we're going to run out of electronic components in 3 to 6 months. And what's that going to do to inflation? So there's so many ramifications of what's going on right now. VW, monster company, laid off 50,000 people in Germany. It's actually causing a global downturn now, what's going on around the world. 50,000 employees out of a job in Germany. And it's happening here. There's not a week that passes that you don't see, oh, we're scaling back or reallocating people. either due to AI, due to the economy, due to oil pricing, whatever it is. So I'll let you ask a few more questions.
Yeah, I don't think you're a doom and gloom. I really think this is the reality. And if you were an Amazon-sized company, you would have floors of business intelligence analysts and people who did all the research who would be able to find all those things and bring them to the strategic team. On the lower end side of our small and medium-sized businesses that don't have all of this broad analysis available, they can maybe track some consumer trends if they know where to look, but they're not going to get the industry information without looking for it, the way that they would get a report if they worked at enterprise, right? So understanding that is a limitation on small businesses. And to your point, we are operating in the same complex environment. Where do we find the trending information? What would you recommend would be good resources and places that industry agnostic, you should keep your eye on the ball? Gas prices is obviously a good one. I didn't know anything about the helium, but I can see how that would be an issue. What are we supposed to keep our eye on outside of our industry that should affect or at least inform our next steps in a strategic plan?
First off, remember that a trend can be either a positive trend or a negative trend. So how do you ride and not resist that? Your trend is what you really want to look at. And some people are not going to the answer I give, but whether you're using Gemini or ChatGPT, go in and actually ask it. This is my industry. If you know your industry code, if you don't say, this is what I do, it'll give you your industry code. Say, what's trending within my industry right now? Also, look very carefully at your customer base and the inventory or product or services you're selling today. What's trending within your services right now? What's trending? Where are you getting new customers from? What's trending in customers? I have to be cautious because I represent so many customers, but I had one customer that they were doing social advertising and they were doing print advertising, billboards, and people landed at the airport. And when we looked at where their customers were coming from, they were all coming from referrals. And mostly from real estate architects or from real estate agents. So what did we do? Everybody that did a referral, we either gave them a gift coupon or we took them out to dinner. And it was only 20 dinners and it resulted in about $3 million worth of sales. So look at what's trending within your customer base and where those leads are coming from. Look what's trending in your geographic region. Talk a little bit about geography. My very first company, I was working as an intern at a Radio Shack dealer in West Milford, New Jersey. He had just mortgaged his house to the hilt, signed an SBA loan. SBA loans you have to pay back, and they'll take your house away from you, by the way. So you think, oh, the small business is giving me this money. Bull dinkies. They're not giving it to you. They're loaning it to you first. And Ford Mahwah, the second largest Mahwah plant in the world, closed the doors. Laid off over a 6-month period of time about 40,000 people. Ford Mahwah. Jungle Habitat. This is a big amusement park. It was Warner Brothers Jungle Habitat. They closed it. The drinking age went from 21 in New Jersey to 18 in New Jersey. So nobody would drive up to West Milford, New Jersey, which is on the border of Greenwood Lake, New York, to drink in New York State because they could now drink in New Jersey at 18. 1/3 of the town was unemployed.
Wow.
1/3 of the town. The plumbers had to leave town to go get work. The construction, nobody was doing anything. The town was dead. And I told Joe, the owner, I said, at this rate, you're going to be out of business in about a year. He said, silly kid, you just got out of college. I looked at the numbers again. I said, you're right, Joe, I was wrong. You're going to be out of business in 6 months. And that's when the light bulb went out. I reached outside of our geographic territory and I said, if we could sell these Radio Shack computers everywhere in the country, And we could because we were a franchise.
Yeah.
I took out an ad in the Wall Street Journal, 201-728-75555. Call for the best prices in the United States on TRS-80 Model 1 computers. The next day I walked in, classified ad, only cost $250. The phones were ringing off the wall, and they never stopped ringing again. So that was riding a trend within a geographic region. So look at your So how do you find a trend? Start with looking at your client base, start with looking at your geographic region, look at your industry segment, use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, Claude or whatever AI, have it, feed it as much information as you can, and let it point out some trends to you. So, and trends can be fun too. I always, usually when I'm doing trends, I usually bring in pizza or lunch for whatever company I'm doing. And I say, let's talk about what's trending. Hey, what's your favorite movie that's come out in the past month? What's your favorite new technology? Hey, what iPhone are you using? What Android phone are you using? And then we lead into trends that are specific for their business. So I get people thinking about what these trends are and get them. And amazing things come out of these meetings. And some of them were right there in front of them, and they just didn't sit down and talk about them as a group.
Yeah, that's it's pretty interesting when you'll hear something or you'll read something, and years later you read something in a book from a founder that says, "I didn't see that right in front of me in the moment when it became really important," or "I did see something really important in the moment when it became important, and that was the game changer." And I really appreciate this conversation because, to your point, and I don't think you're doom and gloom, but I do think that, yes, we're entering another cycle of downturn. Lots of people being laid off, lots of disposable income tightening up a little bit for a lot of families. But as the business owner, without looking at those trends, how can you know not whether or not you have a good project or a bad project, but maybe if the project in quarter 2 needs to maybe move to quarter 3 or be accelerated? I think that the decisions on execution, because I do want you to talk a bit about execution, also get informed from the strategic plan to the execution over that quarter. And the flexibility that you should have going into execution probably still needs to be informed by these things throughout the time that you're implementing the project.
So the execution, I'm really glad that you're to that point, because it's a good way to wrap our time together, is the execution is the most critical component. Stephen Jobs said early on, and I'll steal his quote a little bit, he said, ideas are great, but it's the execution that makes the millions. Ideas are great. So you have 4 strategic projects now. Start by creating these 4 strategic projects. You have one that's going to leverage your strength. That should be a sure bet. You have one that's going to eliminate or mitigate one of your weaknesses. At the end of the quarter, if you were weak and you spent the next 12 to 13 weeks working on redoing your website, now you no longer have a weak website. So you can pick a new weakness the next quarter. That's gone. It's off your list. What's trending? You've looked at trends. What's your biggest obstacle? I'll talk quickly about a brick factory I did in New Zealand. They were at total manufacturing capacity. And one of their competitors from Australia was now importing bricks. They do pavers, bricks, and facade bricks. But they were at total capacity for their plant. So that trend, that obstacle project was, we have to build a new facility. So the first quarter, all they did was look for a facility that they could buy. The next facility, they worked on bank financing for that facility. The next quarter, they worked on buying that facility and doing a buildup. The next quarter, they worked on hiring people for that facility and bringing that facility operational. 5 quarters later, they opened the door and their sales were up 200%. They actually doubled their revenue over the next 2 years. For the next 2 years, they doubled their revenue because they doubled their capacity. But that obstacle project, so obstacle projects sometimes take a long time, and they were all challenging. The most challenging component was getting bank funding, actually. It was really complex. Lawyers, financial people. So the obstacle, don't ignore the obstacle, what's going to prevent you from moving forward. And by the way, if you're a successful company today and you have money in the bank, go set up a line of credit with your bank today. When you have money, it's the best time to borrow from a bank. When you need money, they will not give it to you. So if there is a storm coming, it's always good to have a line of credit, improve your banking relationships right now, if you're in a good position right now. So then you have these 4 projects. Every project gets a leader named to it. Unless you're a company of 1, then of course you're leading the project. But don't try to manage the project yourself. You're going to oversee the project. And then if all possible, come up with 6 or 12 is ideal milestones. 12 because a typical quarter is 12 weeks. 13, first week you're planning, the next 12 you're executing, okay? Week 1 plan, 12 weeks executing. So put together 12 milestones. Then a leadership team meeting every single week. If I have a client that doesn't want to meet weekly, I typically walk away from them, right? And my relationship with them, because I don't want the time I've invested in helping them put together a strategic plan to go nowhere. It's going to go nowhere if not executed. So have that meeting. I hate meetings. Believe me, I worked at Flextronics, a $6 billion company in San Jose. There were way too many meetings. But once a week with your leadership team meeting, 1 hour. You're going to open it up lightly, talk about good news. Then you're going to dive right into your 4 strategic projects. Okay, strength project, weakness project, trend project. Are we working on our biggest obstacle? When you first assign a project, if I assigned a project to you, Dawn, I'd say, Dawn, do you think you could do this over the next 12 weeks? And you'd say, yes. Now, if you said no, I'd say, why are you hesitating, Dawn? And so I'm way too busy. And I'd say, Dawn, if I take this off your plate, do you think you could do it? Oh, yeah. Or if I hired another person to help you, do you think you could do it? And you said, yes. That gives me the ability every week to challenge you. Because then I say, Dawn, you said at the beginning of the quarter you could do this. How can we help you get this project back on track? I don't beat them up, but I reiterate that I got your buy-in at the beginning of the quarter. What's gone wrong and how can we help you fix it? How can the team help you fix it? How can I help you fix it? What do we do to get this project back on track? So if you go through the 4 projects in that day and they're all on track and you've hit all the milestones that you set out at the beginning of the quarter, you say, great guys. Any other topics for today's meeting? Also, I'd like to follow up with a dashboard of leading metrics. I'm not talking about revenue numbers. That's in the rearview mirror. Okay. I'm not talking about profitability. That's in the rearview mirror. I'm talking about things that are driving the projects. We've reviewed them. But if you're in traditional sales, how many leads did we get in? Okay. How many appointments did we book? How many demonstrations did we do? How many converted to a proposal? What's our proposal close rate? What's our average sales order? Boom. The revenue, well, if you're working the leading metrics, the numbers that are leading up to the results. So a quick review of your leading metrics dashboard. Yes, you as an owner can have cash on hand, cash available, cash number of days left, accounts receivable, accounts payable. You'd never look at any of those in an executive meeting unless one of your goals, your projects was like, our accounts receivable is out of control. So we set up a project. One of our weaknesses, we're not collecting cash quickly enough. Mm-hmm. So then that was your quarterly project, improve our accounts receivable. But we don't look in the rearview mirror. Nothing happens looking in the rearview mirror. It's all looking forward in that meeting. And then we usually close the meeting and we congratulate everybody and very positive. You don't ever beat anybody up. If you have to beat somebody up, you do it outside of the room, away from the other people in that weekly meeting. is how you hold the whole team together and drive the results you're looking for. So I don't know if did that answer your question? I hope so.
Absolutely. Yep, it does. Because the execution layer, to your point, is the piece that makes or breaks it. Where can people find you, learn more about you, learn your methodology, and maybe have a call with you?
Yeah, we post every day on LinkedIn, almost every day, 6 out of 7 at least, and Facebook as well. But my website is www.marcldaniels.com. So Marc with a C, M-A-R-C, L, D-A-N-I-E-L-S. And if you're interested in working with me, I only work with 5 customers per year. There's a little link there where you can click on it and jump on my waiting list. I do have one opening coming up for the July quarter. I never bring on more than 1 customer per quarter because the first quarter I work with a client, I'm typically on site for 3 days, really understanding the business, understanding them. And it's so important to get that first quarter right because once we get them in the rhythm and the cadence, the rest of the quarters just really come together well. And that's, you can click and receive my weekly newsletter. I send out only 40 to 52 newsletters per year, pretty much every week. So that's how they can get in touch with me. So www.marcldaniels.com.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to put that down inside the show notes. So if you find us on the day that we release or even 2 years later, you'll be able to find Marc and get in touch with him and follow him and read all of his wisdom on the strategic planning and, even more important, the execution of your strategic plan in these very complex environments. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Dawn. Thank you so much. Okay.
All right. We'll catch y'all next time on the next episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to DawnKKennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube, as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.